Good afternoon and welcome to TCU College of Education Live Chat. Elevating Black student voices is the work of this forum for the next hour. Elevating Black student voices can also inform as we create a sense of well-being and belonging for Black students, as well as Black educators, leaders, and professors in classrooms, on campuses, and in communities. This is the work for TCU and beyond. I am Dr. M. Francyne Huckaby, Associate Dean of the School of Interdisciplinary Studies and Professor of Curriculum Studies here at TCU. I'm happy to be here with this esteemed and thoughtful panel of people who know what it is like to be a Black student in TCU's College of Education. Leslie Ekpe is a second-year doctoral student in TCU's Higher Educational Leadership Program. Future Dr. Ekpe's research interests include Black women in leadership, college access policies, student activism in the digital age, and racial politics in education, as well as fairness within intercollegiate athletics.
Hi, everyone. I am so thankful to be here and share a platform with such profound individuals. So thank you, Dr. Huckabee.
We also have with us Dr. Jason K. Wallace, who is an assistant professor of higher education in the School of Education at the University of Southern Mississippi. He is a critical qualitative scholar whose research centers on issues of equity and inclusion in higher education, with an emphasis on Black and first-generation college student experiences. He is from Fort Worth and graduated from TCU with his bachelor's in 2009. Dr. Wallace returned for his master's degree in educational leadership and earned his second diploma from us in 2010.
Thank you all so much for having me. It's always good to be in community with fellow Horned Frogs, so glad to be here.
Ms. Chantelle Jones is the lower school assistant division head at All Saints Episcopal School here in Fort Worth. She earned her master's in educational leadership from TCU in 2016 through the Principal Leadership Fellows Program. She is a career educator and school leader in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Ms. Jones is passionate about using her seat at the table to make space for others and ensuring schools are dynamic, supportive, and culturally relevant learning environments for all.
Hi, yes, thank you so much for having me today. It's such an honor to be a part of this panel, such an important discussion.
Our experts will be answering any questions that you have about these topics, particularly about making equitable and inclusive spaces for Black students. Please type your comments, please type your questions in the comments section, and we will get to them later in the program. Before we get to your questions, however, we will begin with some questions that we've prepared for the panel. Leslie, if you wouldn't mind going first with this question. What do you see as the difference between being welcomed and being accepted as a Black student on a university campus? In what ways has TCU welcomed you, and in what ways has TCU accepted you?
Yeah, so thank you. Thank you for that question. When I think about my experience at TCU, I think that I have been privileged to find community. So my mentors, whether it was past faculty members or staff members or even just family, they have helped me along the way to say, hey, when you get to TCU, reach out and find people like you. And that's exactly what I did. I reached out to people in my office. I reached out to faculty members. I reached out to staff members. I wanted to feel included before a university would make me excluded, right? And so when I think about welcoming versus being accepted, I think what first comes to mind is administrators, professors, staff members. We need to view student welcoming or a lack in student progress, so to say, as a problem of the institution, right? Not the student. And so if a student does not feel welcomed, it's not their fault. I think a lot of the times that's what we do. We turn it towards the student. Well, it's their fault they're not reaching out, or we are welcoming students of all races. And if we are welcoming those students, we have to ensure that the policies and procedures that we have in place create a sense of belonging for those students. And so it's one thing to welcome and say, hey, our campus wants you here, but what are we doing to make sure that we retain those students? And even when they leave, what are we doing to make sure that we keep up with those students and still, as Dr. Wallace stated, once a horned frog, always a horned frog, right? But why is it that we have Black students feeling disconnected? And so my hopes for the College of Ed is that we will see this as an issue now before it becomes a bigger issue later, and trying to make sure that students, Black students especially, have a voice now that creates different resources for all Black students in the future.
Thank you for that, Leslie. The next question is for Jason. Jason, what is your sense of the Black alumni experience with TCU? What has it been like for you as a TCU alumnus from undergraduate and graduate programs? How do these experiences compare to those with your doctoral alma mater?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Dr. Huckabee. I think it absolutely varies, right? And it kind of gets to the point that Leslie just made around the labor of the institution versus the labor of its students. And so alumni engagement begins at freshman orientation. And so if I didn't have a great experience as an undergraduate or as a graduate student, then that's going to translate into how I engage the university later. And I know many of Black alums specifically who have washed their hands of the institution based on their undergraduate experiences, or have not felt engaged post-undergrad, and so they have left and gone and did their own things away from the institution. And so I think that it's important for organizations like the Black Alumni Association to be elevated by the institution, the infrastructure to be supported in multiple ways, right? There are folks who are actively giving their labor and are actively giving their time to try to build that community, but that just hasn't necessarily come to fruition as many folks have liked it to do, right? So I think that's one piece of the alumni experience that we need to further interrogate and figure out how do we continue to engage our Black alums. As I think about my doctoral alma mater, it is not perfect by far, right? And there were some intentional things that were done to not only foster those communities, but to also have an intentional connection to the institution. I can name the first Black graduates of the institution when the institution was desegregated, the first Black graduate student to graduate from my doctoral alma mater. And I don't know any of that information at Texas Christian University. And typically as graduate students, you're kind of disconnected from the institution anyway. But as a doc student graduate, I can name those things and can't even name those things around my undergraduate and master's alma mater, right? And so I think there needs to be some more intentional ways that we are actively engaging our Black students, centering our Black students, remembering our Black history for our institution, and really repairing some of those relationships so that we can continue to foster that Black alumni community.
Thank you for that, Jason. Shanel, you'll be taking our next question. What was your experience at TCU as part of the Principal Leadership Fellows program? How has that experience informed your work as a leader at your school now?
Yes, thank you for that question, Dr. Huckabee. The Principal Leadership Fellows program is such an important partnership between local school districts and TCU through the College of Education. And so through that program, effective teachers with lots of potential for school leadership are essentially recruited for the program. And it's through that partnership with local school districts that educators are, again, cultivated to become effective and prominent school leaders in our community. My participation in that program was incredible. My fellow cohort members from other school districts, they were also diverse. Again, I think part of the intentionality of the program is to recruit students of color and to recruit educators of color to, again, go out and fill needs in schools. And there is a need for more educators of color at all levels of institutions and districts. And so I felt incredibly supported, and I felt that was my community during my time at TCU. Our professors did not shy away from issues of equity and diversity. I appreciated our head-on approach with those issues. For some of my classmates who were not people of color, I saw and felt bone stretching. And it was unique to, even at TCU, be in a space where, being a person of color, I was not necessarily the minority. And so I think it's important for TCU and other institutions to continue those partnerships, continue those opportunities, because they make a difference and they absolutely matter, not just for the students in the classroom at that time, but as we go out into spaces and use our training and use our learning from TCU to make a difference in schools. The fellows program informs my school leadership philosophy. Again, as I have worked in different schools and school districts, again, we have to have a social justice lens to the work that we do. It's not lost upon me ever that in many of the districts and schools that I've worked in, I have been one of few, if not the only, person of color, and many times both at the teacher level and certainly at the administrative level. And so, it can be challenging and hard in those spaces to bring up issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, to start those conversations or to address issues and needs, especially when you are you are the minority. But that program, again, through seeing the boldness of the professors, seeing the support of these issues in our schools, again, propel me to, every time there's an issue that needs to be brought up, or every time that there's something that needs to be discussed, to have the courage to bring it up, because it's not about me and my comfort level. It's ultimately about our students and them having an environment that best meets their needs for them to succeed.
Thank you so much for that, Shanel. Leslie, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
Yeah, so I love what Ms. Jones was discussing, the social justice aspect, because I believe as educators, you may be the only opportunity that a student has to witness this conversation. More oftentimes than not, especially maybe more so at a PWI, other students aren't having those conversations at home. And so as an educator, bringing these conversations into the classroom, it's very valuable, like Ms. Jones stated. So I want to touch on a little bit of what Dr. Wallace stated as well. When we think about programming and we think about conversations that are happening as far as policies and procedures or just instructions in the classroom, who's in the room when we're making these decisions, right? So when we're looking around, and if you're a faculty member, admin, or staff, who's in the room, right? So if you're making a policy or a procedure that's going to affect, right, Black students, when you look around, if there are no Black students in the room, I think that's a problem, right? And so when that turns into students being marginalized. So the traditional view, when you see an opportunity like Ms. Jones was stated, was discussing, if we're talking about the opportunities that are in the College of Ed, sometimes faculty members may be geared towards giving those opportunities to who they deem deserving, without realizing that that could be a gatekeeper, right? So choosing elite students who deserve to receive the intern or deserve to become that teacher or professor, and disregarding everybody else being Black students or Black and Latino, that's where the problems show up, right? And so this is where we create barriers to success for Black students. And so I think that changing the mindset of faculty so they have high expectations of Black and Latino students, that matters, right? As a faculty member or staff member, you should see 100 students in your classroom, and you should remember that they were carefully selected to be at TCU. They have an obligation here, and whether you have high expectations for them or not, someone admitted them into the College of Ed because they believe that they can do it. So if those 100 students don't succeed, it's not on the students. you're failing them, right? So what did you not do to give them the resources to be successful? What did you, I always, like, as an educator, when I get home and I'm exhausted, I'm like, am I exhausted because I did the work for myself, or am I exhausted because I went out and I made sure that whoever I am influencing, I gave it all I could, right? I exhausted my resources to make sure that the people that I'm around are successful. And so what I guess for faculty, administrators, and staff, what are you doing wrong or what are you doing right that students can't learn from the material that you're teaching? And so that goes back to the social justice, and you want to have those conversations. Like, where are the gaps? What am I not addressing, right? And so I think Ms. Jones and Dr. Wallace, I was like, oh, I have to say one more thing, because I that's so valuable, that's so crucial to the success of students, not only in the academy, but the College of Ed.
Thank you so much for that. I have a next question for all of you or anyone who wants to address it, and then we'll take a question from the comments. Too often, as Black people pursuing our educational goals, we adjust ourselves to fit into and find pathways of success through institutions reluctant to make adjustments for us. The impact is profound in terms of the buildup of microaggressions, called micro not because they are little, but because they occur in interactions on the micro person-to-person level. There are also an impact from the institutional and systematic macro levels. Du Bois noted double consciousness as a means of survival by seeing ourselves through the impositions of whiteness. If you could imagine for a bit an educational environment made for you, affirming of you, what would it be? Who wants to take that one?
I guess I'll
Thank
try
you,
it. I think the pause and the delay is telling, right? In that we have not been able to imagine educational spaces that are created specifically centering Black students, right? For those of us who might have attended historically Black colleges and universities, we get some semblance of that in a lot of ways, and they're doing good work and also still functioning within this system of white supremacy, right? So we have to even trouble some of the ways that those institutions show up. I'm thinking about what would it mean to walk on a campus. I remember touring Morehouse College, and this is after I had graduated from TCU, and immediately as I stepped foot on campus, felt like I was supposed to be there. I had no relationship with Morehouse, had never even visited Atlanta to that point, but saw my fraternity seal on the campus prominently placed, saw other Black folks on the walls of the buildings named after Black folks, right? Recognizable areas. And so those things immediately, I felt like I was included and centered in what I was supposed to be on that campus for, right? And so thinking about our campus ecology and how our campus environments look, we have to be intentional about every aspect of the campus reflecting Black students and Black student experiences. And so even troubling some of the ways that we have created spaces on campus, so our multicultural offices and things like that, we also have to trouble what forms of anti-Blackness even shows up in those spaces, right? So how are other folks of color, non-Black people of color, perpetuating anti-Blackness even in those spaces? And so there has to be multifaceted, it has to be multi-layered. We have to be intentional about our curriculum. I know this is supposed to be outside of the classroom, right? But those things really impact the conversations that then take place outside of the classroom. How many Black scholars are we reading in our disciplines? How many Black folks are we seeing on the screens, guest lectures, things of that nature? How many Black faculty are we engaging with in and out of the classroom? All of those things matter into how we feel like we matter at the university.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace. Would Ms. Ekpe or Ms. Jones like to add anything?
Sure. Dr. Wallace, I can just so appreciate everything that you stated, and I love the example you gave of your visit to Morehouse, and kind of relating some of that to the K12 perspective. It is just so evident to Black students, Black families, Black faculty, Black teachers, Black educators, when decisions are made with Black people in the room. When you know that, again, this unit that I'm teaching in my class, that it had the perspective or the lens of a person of color, a Black person, that our history is not diminished to just Martin Luther King Day or the month of February, but as we're learning about American history at all levels, that again, people of color and their contributions are throughout prominent parts of that. I think just, like you said, when you first stated, it's hard for us to even imagine, because just trying to think, what would a space look like for, again, a K-12 student or a college student to walk in and say, I belong here. People of color tend to go where people of color already are. And that is because space has been made for them. Decisions have been made with them in mind. From, again, that K-12 lens, specifically, with 80% of our teachers and administrators being white, again, we have to recruit and retain more. We have to have people of color at all different levels speaking and making a difference. They can't just be there and be put in a corner or put in a classroom or put on the website. They have to be there and be asked their opinion. They have to be a part of the decision making. They have to be a part of, again, what's happening and what's being decided at that level. And so, again, when we think about what can we do to make students of color, or Black students specifically, feel more, feel at home, feel like this is a space for them, affirming to them. Again, it's affirming decisions at every level of the school by having them be a part of those decisions.
Thank you so much for that. If you are just joining us, welcome to this esteemed panel with the College of Educational doctoral student Leslie Ekpe and alumni Dr. Jason K. Wallace and Chantelle Jones. If you have any questions for our panelists, please type them in the comment section and we will address them shortly. And we do have a couple of questions here in the comment section. One builds on what you were just answering, but I think it asks for maybe a little bit more nuance, and so I'll pose it to you. And the question is, maybe for Jason or Leslie, how can universities do a better job of embracing our Black students beyond the academic environment so that they feel a place within the university? Is there anything that you want to add from what you said before?
So I think that we have to be mindful. I love what Ms. Jones stated about being in the room, but also being careful as educators to not partake in tokenism, right? And so when we speak about Black students or we're in conversations, especially with the racial injustices happening all across our nation, it's really easy to point to the Black person and say, well, you know this experience, so go ahead and tell the classroom, right? Or can you speak on this? I think it's crucial right now when we talk about like spreading anti-racist narratives that faculty, staff, administrators are trained in this area, right? So they're well equipped with the resources to give knowledge to the classroom, and that, whether that's inside the classroom or outside, as Dr. Wallace stated, training people to discuss racial issues is crucial, right? We shouldn't rely on the one Black student in class to give everyone else in class a lesson on racism in the United States or race and the history it plays for at PWIs, right, or historically white institutions. And so providing professional training for faculty, whether you're at the K through 12, right, as Ms. Jones stated, on how to lead effective conversations about racism in the classroom. And as advisors, I think just providing similar training to administrators, staff, and even students can be very valuable. I just wanted to add that little piece to the great information that Ms. Jones already stated. I truly think that if we can develop new metrics for success, then in turn our students, and our Black students more specifically, will be successful. But when we are instituting policies or procedures without those students in the room, or without a Black individual in the room, we really can't say that this is successful for them without their input.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We have another question from our Facebook audience. Since TCU has very few Black faculty, how can white faculty elevate Black student voices? What do you wish your white faculty knew about you and your experiences? And this is for anyone who wants to address it.
Yeah, I think it was really important for faculty to show up for Black students, and not just in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. I think about the times when I was an undergraduate and Black and white faculty members would come to a Black student event and show face, and not just to be there to be a face in the room, but also to engage in the conversation, to seek to learn, to do the readings before showing up. And we know what that means and looks like, right? And so I think that's vital that white faculty members are doing that to understand their Black student experiences. I also think it's super important that white faculty members and not only embrace the Black students in the classroom, but embrace the communities where the Black students are coming from. I was 10 minutes from home. I'm born and raised in Fort Worth, but I was from the east side of Fort Worth, the Eastwood. And some of the disparaging comments I heard from my white faculty members during my undergraduate experience about the things that were happening across town where my grandmother lived, where my cousins stay, right? Those are the things that hurt the most as an undergraduate student. And so how are we embracing communities? How are you not just going and living in one side of Fort Worth to do your research and to advance your research agenda, but really gaining a group of folks that are community facing to become a part of the community, to work alongside people who are in the community, right? And so those are the ways that white faculty members have to start engaging to then be able to elevate Black student voices in the spaces. And the last thing I'll note is just talking to Black students, right? And so bringing them in and paying them for their labor. So I love what Leslie said about like not calling on me about every question you have about Black people, but you do the reading and bring in folks. And if you're going to bring in Black and brown folks to talk about their experiences, how are you compensating them for their time? How are you compensating them for their labor? What is the reciprocal relationship with that, right? And so actually like marinating that into your curriculum would be great for white faculty members to do.
I'd like to add to that too. Again, Leslie, I think your point about tokenism, as we've all touched on, is just so important because, again, being a minority, a person of color, a Black person in predominantly white spaces, often we are constantly tasked with addressing these different issues, doing the educating, doing the labor, and that is something that is ineffective for us to do on our own. And then to Dr. Wallace's point about, you know, how a white person, how white faculty can support Black students, again, showing up for them in the classroom, showing up for them outside the classroom, in the community, again, showing up for them, for us, globally, or certainly nationally. Again, this summer, the events of this summer with the murder of George Floyd, I heard from so many Black families that I have supported at different schools that I've been a part of. Again, as a community, we were certainly then and still are, of course, hurting behind that incident. And it seemed like, you know, for the first time for many, when we say Black Lives Matter, that particular incident was the first time that many started to understand what we meant by that. Not the organization. I can't speak to, the organization, but the statement that Black Lives Matter. And if you work with Black students, if you have a Black student in your class, if you have a Black faculty member at your school, again, I challenge you to do the work of understanding why Black Lives Matter and why we have to state that. Again, if you don't see the issues surrounding that, if you don't see how our Black skin, whether you're a 3-year-old, 12th grader, or a doctoral student, if you don't see how our experiences, impact and, again, create the world that we live in, then it's going to be really hard to reach us and teach us. So again, I just challenge all to do the work to unpack that, and to understand, again, why we have to say that, and how your understanding of that impacts the things you say in your classroom and how you can support Black students and Black student voices.
Ms. Jones, that was so powerful. I mean, just from discussing what we have been living with outside of the academy, right? And then what we have to deal with inside of the academy. With the murder of George Floyd, it was at a time where, right, we're in this pandemic and we're still in the pandemic. All eyes were on racial injustices that have been happening, right? But at this point in time, everyone, whether you were white, Black, it didn't matter your ethnicity, you had to focus on this because that's what it was, right? And so I think going back to the question, you have to be intentional, right? We saw a lot this summer with organizations and entities and institutions making statements, but their policies and procedures don't match, right? So to me, that's performative. You're being performative because you're putting on a play for people to assume that you support the communities that you serve. Well, what happens is you eventually get called out because people are uncomfortable in the position of your organization because, that little black square stating we're with you doesn't match your policy or doesn't match how your faculty have been practicing their pedagogical practices in class, right? And so the work of really and truly becoming a co-conspirator is a lifetime, like, you have to devote yourself to that work. And it's tiring, right? But I think that broadening and making inclusive classroom content and pedagogy is impactful, right? So when I look at materials and I look at different practices in class or just the instructors, what does that look like to the students in your classroom, right? We have a lot of whitewashed history. So if this is the only thing that you're portraying, of course, your practices don't match what you're trying to implement. And that goes back to the social justice factor. But I mean, I think where we are at right now is such a crucial point in history because we have the opportunity to change what it has been. And if we don't adapt as educators to our ever-growing communities that we serve, we are going to miss out on a lot of students that could be so successful. And that's my fear, right? And so I think from creating more inclusive materials to your practices, to your conversations, can really change the dynamic of our institution.
I think that I'm hearing in your responses to these questions that elevating Black voices is not sufficient. So since this panel is entitled Elevating Black Student Voices, what is the role of elevation? How does it, what does it make possible, and what comes next? It seems as though it's a start, not an end. I see you all are thinking about that one.
It's a lot, and it's a lot to kind of think about and ponder. I go back to Leslie, and I'm going to misquote it, and I want you to correct me, but the difference between welcoming and acceptance. Again, as in schools, K12 schools, we have students of color, especially in private K12 schools. We are recruiting and we actively seek students of color. And I know that's the same in higher education. And I think a lot is done to make sure that people feel welcome. We're not actively racist. We're not trying to be racist. We don't think we have any policies or a culture that is actively racist, but again, do people of color feel accepted? And can students of color, faculty of color, be their complete and whole selves in this space? Do we ask those questions? Do we seek that information? Do we care? When we find out that someone is not feeling safe or someone is not able to be their authentic self, do we work to dismantle what it is that's preventing them from being able to do that? And so it is a lot to unpack because, again, elevating voices, just kind of like putting a spotlight on it. To Leslie's point, there was a spotlight on racial injustice this past summer. But again, beyond, shining a light on it and saying this exists and I accept that this exists, what is the next step to dismantling that? And I think it goes back to so many of the points that we've kind of touched on throughout our conversation is, a lot of it is doing the work. It is doing hard work. It is recognizing, again, the systemic reality of racism and dismantling that. And so, it's a heavy question because you're right. Elevating voices is just the first step. We need to be, again, accepting and propelling our students of color and our Black students.
I just want to share a few comments from the chat with you so that this can be a broader conversation. From Rodney King: if educational institutions don't stop minimizing the influence of Blacks and people of color in our history, we will never reach an equity position. Miriam Azani stated, powerful concepts for faculty reflection. How do we as an institution show up for our Black students in our iconography, in the curriculum, in our relationships with them, in listening to their perspectives? She also adds, thank you for posing food for thought. Any responses to their comments? Or would you like me to ask another question?
Yeah, I have one small statement, Blair. But I think that, once again, Ms. Jones, I just love sharing the platform with her. She's so intelligent. I think in order to elevate Black student voices, you have to analyze the policies and procedures that are in play that create success for certain students, right? So when we're looking at curriculum, when we're looking at pedagogical practices, when we're looking at policies, when we're looking at conversations, who benefits from those, right? So ask yourself, so what, after I'm done with my syllabi and I go institute it in a semester, who benefited from that class, right? And if for some reason you see that a Black student is left out of your answer, that's where it starts, right? We want to tackle and dismantle racism and institutional racism, systemic racism, without realizing that it starts within your classroom, right? That's crucial, that's key. It starts within the conversations we're having. That policy really doesn't fit our Black students, or I could see that policy running into some trouble when it comes to our Black students or Black graduate students, right? And so I think it's truly crucial that we start with where we are, right? We want to tackle this broad, problem or discussion right now in the nation, but if everyone could tackle it where they're sitting in their classroom, in their organization, then we're all simultaneously working on dismantling it through the policies, the curriculum, the discussions that we're having. I think that's a great place to start when we talk about elevating Black student voices, because inevitably we'll start to see that we're creating structures that will create sense of belonging for these students.
I'll add to that. Retweet everything everybody just said is so good. I also want to I'll challenge folks to ask the question of which Black students' voices are you elevating, right? And so I think that sometimes when Black students assimilate to the environment, those Black student voices are then elevated. And so I think about Dr. T.J. Stewart talks about who's in the margins of the margins, right? So thinking about Black students who are queer and trans on our campuses, thinking about Black students who are Muslim on our campuses, thinking about Black students who are international students on our campuses, right? Who are dealing with xenophobia, dealing with homophobia, dealing with transphobia, all those things, right? We have to think about how can we elevate all Black student voices and think about Black students outside of this monolithic view if we're going to truly talk about dismantling systems and doing the work. So just one thing that I want to challenge faculty and administrators to do is to start asking those harder questions. Black students have been using their voices forever, right? Since they let us on these white campuses, we've been using our voices. And so it's about now listening, and as Shanel said, and acting. We need to start listening, acting, and asking who else, what else, right? So just something to offer for a challenge for faculty and staff.
We also have a comment from Liz Pinyon. She lists several things, so it's a little bit lengthy, so stay with me here for a second. Develop new metrics for success is number one. Number two, train people in how to discuss racial issues. 3, establish both safe places and brave spaces. 4, help create cross-racial brave spaces for all students to develop authentic and sustained interracial interactions while providing them with tools and support to do so effectively. 5, spread anti-racist narratives. Find multiple ways to counter harmful anti-Black stereotypes, anti-discrimination, and harassment policies. And then she added, perhaps most important, treat diversity and inclusion efforts with the urgency that you treat other institutional issues.
Yes. Yes, and K12 schools, I can certainly, that last point again, we look at student achievement through test scores. We look at, retention efforts. We look at recruitment efforts of students of color, but do we see the issues of DEI as urgent as we do other issues? That's huge. And I think some of her other points that she made about, training, I think that's probably the biggest thing that is missing. Or I don't know about the biggest, but certainly a huge thing that's missing in K12 schools is training our white teachers and white administrators to talk about these issues and address these issues head on, because the microaggressions, the things that our students are experiencing on our campuses, the things that our faculty experience on our campuses are real. And so how do we address those issues? And again, the training to confidently address them with the same urgency that we would address something else.
Yeah, I love that. I also believe that at this point, silence is compliance to me, right? So everything that we've discussed, everything that we've laid on the table this afternoon, many of our viewers may feel as though, oh, okay, well, none of my practices are racist, right? Or none of my practices institute a unwanted space for Black students. But without realizing that it may, right? Have you heard from a Black student? Have you spoken with other Black faculty members, right? I think silence is not optional. I think as educators, we should be tired every day exhausting our resources to make sure that our students have a sense of belonging, not only in our classroom, not only in our department, but on campus. You know, being an educator is tiring, right? They need to pay us more, but that's another discussion for another day. But I think it's so crucial, right? So if you feel as though, hey, this may not apply to me. I feel as though my pedagogy, I feel as though my practices are very inclusive. They may not be as inclusive as you believe, right? Because we're still having this discussion, okay? And so I think that, once again, Ms. Jones, just your point of having that conversation just made me think, and if you are silent, you are compliant. You are a part of the problem.
I think you've done a nice job of pointing some of the difference between being a bystander and being an ally and being a co-conspirator. To be a co-conspirator is asking more than we ask of allies. So I think that's an important distinction. I think we'll wrap up now. If you all wouldn't mind addressing this last question, if each of you could address it, we'd appreciate it. Could you talk about your strengths as leaders, scholars, and educators, and how you approach your current role to honor, recognize Black students, and make better learning environments?
Yeah, so I'll go. In my head, I saw you, Dr. Wallace. In my head, I strive to make sure that I'm always pulling up, right? So I always think about where I was as a K-12 student, right? So if Ms. Jones is my assistant principal, what I was going through at that time, who helped me at that time, who I felt comfortable reaching out to, discussing my issues, who made me, without realizing at the time, feel accepted, right? And so that's always replaying in my mind, and I'm always trying to make sure that for our students here at TCU, more specifically our Black students, that they have that same engagement. I've been blessed and privileged to have people in my life that pulled me up. You know, oh, you want this next level of success. Oh, you want to do this. This is how you do it. Okay, reach out to this person when you get to TCU. I worked with her. I worked with him. Awesome. Okay, I will do that, right? And so inevitably, I'm trying to pull that Leslie up, that person that I saw, right? With, in my work, in my practice, in my research, in my schooling, and even outside of TCU. I mean, I try not to exhaust myself, but I think during this time, I think I've exhausted myself a couple of times, but I'm always trying to make sure that I give the resources that were given to me. And if we always have that mindset, I think that we'll continue to elevate the Black student voices. Just like Dr. Wallace said, we've been speaking, right? But what are we doing to make sure we turn back and say, hey, I'm pulling you up here with me? This platform, when we talk about power and status, we are sharing the platform, okay? That's the only way we are going to be successful. So what am I not doing, or what am I doing that is elevating individuals, but then what am I also doing in my practices that may not be elevating Black student voices?
Dr. Wallace, Ms. Jones, would you like to add your perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think, you know, something that we often don't think about is doing our own inner work. And so thinking about how am I interrogating anti-Blackness that I have adopted and have to unlearn, right? And so doing that work, being very intentional with therapy, with reflection, with member checking with other Black faculty to make sure that I am elevating Black student voices, centering Black folks in my pedagogy and in my practice, right? And so I think those are some of the things that folks have to do at home. In the classroom, it's centering Black scholars, right? It's making sure that your syllabus is reflective of everyone who's going to be in your classroom and the folks that aren't in your classroom. So making sure that those folks are seen in videos and classroom discussions, all of those things I think are critical to really elevating Black student voices in our spaces.
And Ms. Jones.
Yeah, and just to add to the points that have already been made, because I couldn't agree more. Again, I aim to create community. I need the Black students at the school and schools that I've served in the past, school that I currently serve in. I need them to see me. I need them to know me. I need to know them. And it's not about, me seeking any kind of validation or glory thing for myself. I need them to see me to know that I am there for them. In a space where there are not many people who look like them, I need them to know that I am here and I am them and I'm for them. I also think to that point, creating that community for our Black faculty. Again, the schools that I serve in, typically there are not many. And so creating community for them and for all teachers of color, again, creating spaces. Again, there's some opportunities that we have at All Saints for us to meet as faculty of color. And those are just the brightest points of my week sometimes. It's just getting to be in community to support each other. I think Dr. Wallace alluded to, which students get their voices elevated, which ones have assimilated more into the culture of the school, and which students perhaps haven't. And so again, I need, the students to know that, yes, I may blow dry my hair, or yes, I may, dress a certain way or whatever. I need them to know that I am Black. I am blickety Black. And that I see them and that I am for them. And sometimes even with other people of color, you're not so sure, who is in my corner and who got their position, got their spot at the table, but really isn't here for me. And that goes to Leslie's point of mentoring and pulling other people up. Again, I would love to connect with the College of Education and support, teachers who are graduating and looking. They need Black women, Black people to say, like, I see you and you're talented and we need you in our schools. And so again, just having those pipelines, having that support system has made the difference for me. And I must make that difference for others. And when we are, I'm sure I can speak for my fellow brilliant panelists that, when we are in spaces where our brilliance isn't realized, or when we're not able to connect those pipelines, we're frustrated and we feel stuck. And again, the most validating work that I do, and the reason why I got into education and remain in education, is to make a difference. And so, again, it's about using who we are and our experiences to, beyond elevate voices, call all of the people within our educational communities to action.
I love the way in which you all are talking about community and uplifting not only ourselves but others. I'd like to share a comment in the comment section from Rodney King. He says, "I am so proud of these young mentors for having the courage to address this issue. To do this is very risky because we still have a level of bias that wants to silence these voices." So as we go out, if you could briefly just talk a little bit or maybe give some ideas to our audience about how you take care of yourselves so that you can do these brave things in risky times as you're doing today?
I'll say therapy has been huge for me. And I was kind of late to the therapy party. I started this summer, again, realizing that, again, it's okay to not be okay, and that we need to normalize mental health in our Black community. And so, again, that has been huge. Also, I think I love being around our Black community, so our older generations. I think about the adversity that they overcame and the path that they created for me and for people like us on this panel. And so that can be very energizing to me, just to remember, like, keep going, rest, take care of yourself, take a break, but don't stop. And so that has been motivating and helpful for me.
I'm going to echo therapy for sure. Definitely being able to unplug. I think for a lot of us, regardless of your ethnicity, 2020 has been a trying year, and it's not over, right? So we have a lot going on in the upcoming months with the elections. We are still in a pandemic. I have to remind myself of that, right? Because when we're having conversations and we discuss what happened in April, or I'm like, oh, we are still in the same situation we were in April, right? And so being able to unplug, and as scholars and as educators, sometimes that's difficult, because we're always wanting to do more for other people. We always want to do more for our students, our colleagues, our communities, without realizing that we need healing ourselves. So unplugging from the news, unplugging from whatever it might be that you're used to indulging in every day, being okay with stepping away and saying, you know what, I'm not going to get on social media today. I'm also not going to work on research. I'm going to lay here and I'm going to watch Netflix. And it's going to be okay, because the work that I'm supposed to be doing will still be there when I get back up from my nap, right? And so I've had to learn to say, you know what? Put that aside, because I cannot commit to the work of diversity. I cannot commit to the work of inclusivity until I'm 100%. So I can't give 100% until I'm 100%, because that's what this work requires. And in order for me to be in that position, I have to be okay with resting. And that word even makes me itch, but I have to be okay with sitting down, right? And making sure that I'm mentally okay before I enact in the work.
Yep, I will, again, retweet my brilliant fellow panelists. All of that. Absolutely, therapy is number one on the list for me. Drinking water, sleeping, like doing things that feel good to your body. Absolutely forms of self-care. Music as a huge form of self-care for me. It's again kind of escaping in that way. And I'll just leave with and thinking about being able to imagine and reimagine Black futures, right? So I think that's important. Imagining that a life for Black and brown folks that to be free, that are liberating. I think that is super important for our own self-care, to continue to hold on to hope, to continue to hold on to love, to continue to love on one another and be in community. All those things will help us continue to fight the fight that our ancestors and our elders have fought before us. And so, yeah.
Thank you all. This has been such a joy-filled experience to be with you, to hear from you. It's been uplifting and elevating, and I hope that our audience in Facebook has felt the same. Thank you for joining us. As we leave, I just want to thank our wonderful, brilliant, thoughtful panel, Leslie Ekpe, Dr. Jason K. Wallace, and Ms. Chantelle Jones. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the week.